There is a particular moment in any large movement when it stops being background noise and starts being something that institutions have to take seriously. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds. First it's a petition, then it's hundreds of thousands of signatures, then it's senior officials speaking on record, then it's a former president of the world's most powerful football body posting publicly that the fans who want to stay away are right. And then, suddenly, you look at the full picture and realize the background noise has become something else entirely. That is where the boycott movement around the 2026 World Cup stands today, on the 7th of June, 4 days before the tournament opens in Mexico City. It has not stopped the football. No team has withdrawn. The matches will be played. But something real has happened, something measurable and documented, and it has left a mark on this tournament that promotional language alone cannot erase. The boycott conversation around 2026 did not begin as a single organized campaign. It emerged from multiple directions simultaneously, driven by different communities, different concerns, and different calculations about risk and principle. What makes it significant is not any one of those directions in isolation. It's the convergence. The fact that the same conclusion, "I'm not going," has been reached by a Dutch supporter who signed a petition, by an LGBTQ fan organization with decades of history attending tournaments, by a Senegalese supporter who cannot obtain a visa, by a father in the American Midwest who found the prices impossible, and by a former FIFA president posting publicly that the fans have a point. When the same destination is reached from that many different starting points, it tells you something genuine is happening. So what's really happening here? Let's go through it carefully, because the boycott movement around this World Cup is not one thing. It is several other things happening simultaneously, and understanding each of them separately is the only way to understand what they amount to together. Start with the numbers, because the numbers are where everything becomes concrete. A petition in the Netherlands calling on the national team to withdraw gathered more than 174,000 signatures. Not a general petition about the state of the world, a specific request to a specific football federation asking it to make a specific decision. Over 170,000 people took the time to add their names to that document. A dedicated online group calling for a boycott of the American portion of the tournament grew to more than 25,000 members. Social media platforms across multiple countries hosted discussions in which people pledged not to attend matches, with some going further and saying they would not even watch the televised coverage. These are not fringe numbers. They represent a meaningful body of public opinion that has chosen, as its vehicle of expression, the most powerful tool available to ordinary supporters: absence. The formal institutional dimension of the boycott debate added a different kind of weight to those numbers. The heads of 20 European football federations discussed the possibility openly. The vice president of one of the world's most respected football associations gave an interview to a newspaper in Hamburg in which he said the time had definitely come to think and talk about a boycott concretely. He compared the current moment to the Cold War-era Olympic boycotts of 1980 and 1984. He was not speaking for himself alone. He was articulating a concern that had circulated among senior institutional figures across European football for months. His federation eventually rebuked him for raising the question in public rather than through internal channels. But the question itself had already landed. It had already been heard. And the rebuke, for the manner, not the substance, did nothing to close the conversation. Then there is the endorsement that no one in football's establishment wanted to see: a former FIFA president, a man who ran the governing body for 17 years, whose understanding of the institution's mechanics is deeper than almost anyone outside it, posted publicly that he believed the fans who wanted to stay away were right. He quoted a Swiss legal expert who had worked alongside FIFA on governance reform, who advised supporters directly and without qualification to avoid the United States. "You'll see it better on television anyway," the expert said, and upon arrival, fans should expect that if they don't please the officials, they'll be put straight on the next flight home, if they're lucky. Those are not the words of someone on the margins of football. That is someone who has spent decades at its center, expressing a view about the risks of attending a tournament in the host nation. Here's the interesting part, because the boycott movement is not simply a protest against ticket prices or a reaction to specific logistical failures, though both of those things are real and documented. It is, at its deepest level, a question about what the World Cup is supposed to stand for. And that question has been sharpened considerably by a series of decisions and events that have accumulated around this tournament in a way that feels different from previous editions. The travel ban situation has been the most direct expression of that question. 39 countries are subject to entry restrictions into the United States. The majority of those nations are, as has been widely noted, non-white, African, or Muslim majority. 4 of the 48 qualifying nations, Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, have supporters who face direct barriers to attending matches in the primary host country. Those supporters did not fail to qualify. Their teams earned the right to be at the World Cup. The supporters simply cannot follow them. A petition that emerged from multiple countries, from England to France, from New Zealand to Canada, captured the sentiment of those asking the same question. Can football's most universal competition be truly universal when a significant portion of the world's football-supporting population is functionally excluded from attending it in person?
The governing body's response to that question has been consistent and, for many, deeply unsatisfying. The commitment to inclusion is underpinned by the statutes. Everyone is welcome. Football unites the world. These phrases have been deployed in press releases and official statements throughout the buildup. What they have not been is accompanied by any specific operational commitment that addressed the concrete situations of fans from banned countries, or fans who face the kind of safety calculation that led established LGBTQ supporter organizations to announce they would not bring a visible presence to the American matches. And then there is the Iran situation, which deserves to be examined specifically because it represents the most dramatic single expression of the boycott impulse at an institutional level during this tournament cycle. Iran boycotted the World Cup draw itself. When the draw took place in Washington in December, Iran's Football Federation announced it would not attend after the United States denied visas to several senior members of its delegation. Senior officials who needed to be in Washington for one of football's most ceremonial occasions were told they could not enter the country. The Federation described the move as non-sporting. It was a preview of what would become the defining logistical challenge of the tournament's preparation: a qualified nation unable to operate normally within the primary host country, ultimately requiring a diplomatic intervention from Mexico to find a workable arrangement. Now, this is where things change, because the boycott movement, for all its size and for all the seriousness of the institutions and individuals associated with it, has not produced what a formal boycott requires. No team withdrew. No federation crossed the line from discussion to action. A published assessment by a respected international affairs institution, updated on the 5th of June, 2 days ago, concluded that discussions about boycotting had come from coaches, politicians, civilians, and the heads of 20 European football federations, but none ultimately came to fruition. The odds of a boycott involving countries withholding their teams, the assessment noted, remain incredibly low. At the end of the day, players want their shot. That observation is both accurate and important because it identifies the fundamental reason why formal team boycotts are so rare in modern football. The players, whose careers are built around exactly this kind of moment, are not willing to sacrifice their chance at a World Cup for a political statement, however legitimate the concerns behind it might be. But individual and fan-level boycotts are a different matter entirely, and those have happened, are happening, are measurable. Thousands of people who held tickets sold them. When they did, the governing body took a 15% fee from both the seller and the buyer. The institution that was managing the conditions that led to ticket sales profited from the decision to sell. Supporters across Europe changed their travel plans. Aviation data confirmed that bookings from Europe to the American host cities fell significantly year on year. Hotels across 11 host cities reported in a comprehensive industry survey that around 80% were tracking below their initial booking forecasts. Research firms adjusted their visitor number projections downward before the first match was played. The boycott movement, even without a formal team withdrawal, produced real-world consequences that showed up in real data. The bigger issue is what this reveals about the structural relationship between football's governing body and the supporters who sustain it. Because the movement did not emerge from nowhere. It emerged from a specific set of decisions about pricing, about host selection, about the management of travel restrictions, about the cancellation of anti-discrimination messaging at tournament venues, about the delivery of a peace prize at a political ceremony, about the deflection of responsibility for fan festival cancellations, about the 15% fee on resold tickets. Each of those decisions was a choice, and the accumulated effect of those choices was a supporter community that felt, in significant numbers, that the institution had stopped acting in their interests.
Think about what a boycott of a football tournament actually costs the person who chooses it. Not money, they've already spent that on the ticket, or they're losing the money they might have spent on travel and accommodation. What it costs is the thing they love, the match, the atmosphere, the experience they've been looking forward to. When enough people decide that cost is worth paying, that staying away is the more honest expression of their relationship with the sport than attending, something significant is shifted. It's not a casual decision. It comes from somewhere real. Historical parallels are instructive here, but they have to be applied carefully. The 1964 African withdrawals from the World Cup, more than a dozen nations refusing to participate in protest of FIFA's qualification policies, resulted in genuine institutional change. FIFA reformed its regional allocation system. The boycott achieved its stated goal. The 1980 and 1984 Olympic boycotts are remembered more ambiguously. The geopolitical situations they were designed to protest continued regardless. The athletes who missed their moment never got it back. And the consensus that formed over the following decades was that sports boycotts rarely produce the political outcomes they intend, while reliably producing human costs for the athletes caught in the middle. But 2026 is not a straightforward match for either historical comparison. The call for fans, not teams, to stay away is a different kind of action. It doesn't remove athletes from their moment, it changes the atmosphere of the stadiums they compete in, and it changes the economic return of the tournament for the institution being targeted. When the governing body's commercial model depends on full stadiums, vibrant fan festivals, and the kind of international atmosphere that justifies the scale of its sponsorship deals, a sustained fan boycott, even a partial one, has financial consequences. Those consequences don't show up immediately, they accumulate. And as the evidence from hotels, airlines, and resale markets suggests, they are already accumulating. What happens next is genuinely uncertain. The football, once underway, will create its own momentum. Fans who were on the fence will be drawn in by results, by performances, by the kind of moments that only a World Cup produces. Some of the gap between projection and reality in attendance and atmosphere may close as the tournament progresses. Cities adapt. Communities find ways to make an event feel like a celebration, even when the official infrastructure has fallen short. But the boycott movement will not simply disappear when the first goal is scored. The concerns that produced it, about access, about pricing, about safety, and whether this tournament was built for the people who love football or for the institution that commercially exploits that love, will still be there on the 19th of July when the trophy is lifted. And they will still be there when the conversation about 2030 and 2034 begins in earnest. What the movement has done, regardless of its formal outcomes, is make those concerns visible and documented in a way that cannot be retrospectively tidied away. What do you think? You've followed this sport long enough to have a view on the difference between protest that changes things and protest that is noted and filed away. Does the boycott movement around 2026 feel like something with genuine long-term consequences for how FIFA operates? Or does it feel like a moment of legitimate anger that will pass without producing the institutional accountability it's calling for? And here's the question that matters most. When the next World Cup host is announced, and the promises about inclusion and access and affordable tickets begin again,
Will the events of 2026 make you more or less likely to believe them? If you found this worth your time, a like helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you enjoy thoughtful football coverage, and let me know your view in the comments. I read every one.